I don't hear anything yet. I don't know if it started.
Yogi Charu?
Oh, you wanted the other one?
Yogi Charu, we can't hear you just yet.
Oh my god. Oh wait, I'm on.
Yogi Charu, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Charu. Uh-oh.
Is he here? Has he come on?
Yeah, he's talking, but no one can hear him.
How do we know? Oh, wow, that's amazing. Okay.
No sound yet.
Yogi Charu, we can't hear you. Hello?
No.
Did he mute us out? Is that what he did? And he doesn't realize?
No, we can hear each other, so.
Well, how can he not hear us and tune us?
Mm.
Oh, maybe he's having difficulty. Yeah, maybe he's working on it.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I can hear you now. Yay.
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. So I was just chanting my Pradami prayers. Now Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shri Mate Bhakti Charu Swami Nityanamane Snigna Cheta Sapraneta Bhagnanam Chara Sattvatam Prabhupagata Prana Nome Bhakti Charu Padam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gauda Bhakta Brinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your valuable time as we explore the Smaran Utsav of Bhakti Charu Swami. I started out my yoga journey in Belize, and I remember I had two friends who they had a lot of spiritual books. And those days I was limited to get books because I was in a country where it's a Christian country, and to get access to anything from the East is difficult. But somehow two of my friends had some Buddhist books, some Bhagavad Gita, and one of my friends had The Science of Self-Realization from Srila Prabhupada. And I remember reading the Gita first, and I remember it was a good book, but I was too involved. I can't live it. So I gave it back to my friend. And my friend was reading The Science of Self-Realization. And he gave it to me, and I read The Science of Self-Realization from Srila Prabhupada. And I was like, wow, this makes so much sense now. And so I fell in love with the yogic culture, because by then I was already contorting my body, twisting it, the asana part. But we were getting into meditation. And once I read The Science of Self-Realization, Srila Prabhupada presented the philosophy so beautifully, because he opened up a world for me for understanding what yoga really is. And I had developed an inclination right then to go to the Himalayas. I wanted to go to the Himalayas from there. But the back of the books had the BBT for LA, Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. And so we wrote to the BBT, and we got some more of Prabhupada's books. And as I started to read Prabhupada's books more and more, I started to understand the qualities of a yogi, someone who's developing into a yogi, the qualities they should have. Me and my friend left Belize and we landed in LA. My friend's father lived in LA, so we got to LA first, and the LA ashram accepted us, and I was able to do some service there. And I remember I got to the Krishna temple, and the first day I'm doing my asana and my pranayam, and I remember devotees, they came in and said, "That's Maya. You should just chant the Maha Mantra." So I, my nature, I accepted it. But then as I gave up practicing my asana part and things like that. And I was really getting so much benefit from chanting the Maha Mantra, starting to study the Bhagavatam. And as I started to study the Bhagavatam, my love for Srila Prabhupada grew even more, but he had already passed, he already left the planet. He died in 1977. I got to LA in end of 93, beginning of 94. And so my appreciation for Srila Prabhupada grew so much when I started to learn that his mother tongue is actually Bengali. Prabhupada speaks Bengali, and he had to learn English, and he had to learn Sanskrit. And he translated this amazing book, the Bhagavatam, from Sanskrit to English. That's like trying to ask someone who speaks English, go translate a book from French to Spanish. And your first language. So my love for Prabhupada grew so much. And Prabhupada opened my vision of all these great rishis of yoga, Vyasadeva, Narada Muni, and I understand the qualities they had. And then I also understood that at that time, for you to make spiritual progress, you need a guru. So I went to, I was living in LA, and I remember one of my friends, he was in India for the Mayapur festival, and he came to LA, and we started to share rooms in the ashram. And he had met many, and I've met many gurus passed through LA. And then he mentioned Bhakti Charu Swami to me. That's my first, and that's how I heard of him. And when Bhakti Charu Swami visited LA, because he had a disciple, those days he didn't have many disciples in America, but he had one disciple, Vishwambar, in San Diego, in Laguna Beach. So when he would visit America, he would go to Laguna Beach, but he would fly into LA. And I remember this person came to the temple, and he led a kirtan in the morning. And he took the mic and he started to take the mic to each and every person to chant the mantra. And I was just so impressed with that. And he came to me, and he just felt someone who was not chanting for himself, me, myself, and he was chanting for the deities, and he wanted to engage everyone to chant. And I was like, wow, so touched. In the evening, there was a home program, and I went to that program, and I just heard him lecturing. And what struck me the most, that inspired me right from that first experience with him, was his humility. And I have been studying the Bhagavatam. You hear all these great yogis, they have humility in their heart. And to see how humble he was, although he was very knowledgeable and kind. And I remember he gave me such an embrace that day. He asked me, who am I? Those days, everyone knows me as Yogi Charu now. Those days, my name was Bhakti Charu. I said, I'm so-and-so. And he gave me a beautiful embrace. And I was like, wow. he didn't judge me for my complexion. It was like he connected to the spiritual essence of who I am. And I was like very touched. Then he's going to go to Laguna, so I went to the authorities and asked if I can go to Laguna, and they said yes. So me and my friend, who eventually got initiated by Bhakti Charu Swami as well, his name is Chandrasekhar, we went to Laguna Beach and we stayed with him and traveled with him for like 3 or 4 days. And then I remember those days I was going to India, but then I couldn't stay in India too long because I had to come back because of my visa problem. But Chandra, he already had, he had US citizenship. So when it was time to go to India, Chandra went before me. And I remember he went and then he came and just have all these amazing stories of Bhakti Charu Swami again. And so I already was feeling connected to him that way. And then my authorities were asking me, would you want to take a guru? But before I was hesitant. But when I met Bhakti Charu, because I met many Swamis by that time. When I met Bhakti Charu Swami, I was like, yes, I went to the authority and said, yes, I would love to take shelter of Maharaj. I'm not sure, but let me write to him. And I'm not sure if he's going to accept me anyway. So I wrote him a letter. I remember it was faxed to him. And just wanted to take shelter of him. And I got a letter. I still have it. It's in New York. The letter, the envelope, Tridanda Swami Sannyasi, Bhakti Charu Swami. That's what it's called. And my service, my seva, because I didn't do yoga then, I stopped doing my asana, right? So this center had me to. I appreciate Prabhupada's book so much, so they asked me to. They taught me the art of distributing Prabhupada's books, and I understood how much Prabhupada wanted to have his books being distributed. And I somehow, by Krishna's mercy, I became very good at it. My friends, they trained me up properly, and me and my friend Chandrasekhar, we became very good at distributing this transcendental wisdom to people. And I remember the letter came back from Bhakti Charu Swami where he says, that he remembered exactly who I am. Whenever he comes back to LA, that I can go and travel with him. So, because I couldn't get to India because I had my issue with my visa. And I remember Chandra went to India and he got initiated in India. And so Bhakti Charu Swami came back to LA. A year after that first meeting. And then I remember I felt a little like upset, like my friend, because we grew up together in the ashram, like he got initiated in India and they were like, like 30 devotees getting initiated. I felt hurt, like a little stressed. And that's just natural, you're young, right? And when Maharaj came and I told him I got my visa sorted out, I have a green card now. He wrote me and says, no, he won't initiate me and he won't give me my initiation in India. He'd do it in Los Angeles. So I was like, great. And I remember, and I have my video still on the day of my initiation. It was just me. I look back at it now and I'm just so, what kind of mercy I got to just be one person he's focusing on. Then he gave me there's a saying, I don't know why he gave me, years later when I meet my other god brothers, they ask me, what's your name? And I would say, he gave me the name Charu Chandradas. He gave me his own name. And then I understood that, you know, sometimes people get, in the material sense, people get junior and seniors. They give their same name to their, so but then I understood, wow, he gave me his own name, but it's a high level to try and live up to that name. And I remember when he gave me my Diksha, he asked me for, and besides my vows, he told me to take another vow. He said, I want you to never, ever leave ISKCON. He said, you can live outside, but never leave the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada. And that has stuck to me so much through these years. I remember after my initiation, it's the culture. You go around the community and you get alms, you get donations. And I remember I collected maybe like $600 or $700. And we went to the room he was in, and the temple president was there. And I gifted it to Bhakti Charu Swami. And Bhakti Charu Swami says, thank you so much. And he gave the whole thing to the temple president. He says, this is for Rukmini Diwakadish. I was like, wow, you can see the sense of detachment there. So because I was distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, I became one. I saw that years later, now I'm reflecting, that's what got me. I was in his consciousness that way. And I remember spending time with him. He would, again, we'd go to Laguna, we'd go to San Diego. And I remember one day we got to San Diego and the temple authority was saying, oh, the deities, well, we need certain finance, we're trying to build this or build that. And Maharaj had just come from a travel from Europe and East Coast, and now he's West Coast. And Maharaj heard the need, and Maharaj, Bhakti Charu Swami asked me, go up to my room and get me this bag. So I went and got his bag, and he took out all the donations that he had been given over his travel. And I remember it was up like $4,000, and he just gave it to the temple in San Diego. And I started to understand his nature. For him, the society is a family, and he lived from that place. So I started to learn my psyche. I started to understand what it means to be someone who's living so purely. I started to understand the Bhagavatam deeper and deeper through him, because I didn't get to meet Srila Prabhupada. But here was someone who's like a living example of all these great yogis. And to see how he acts with different individuals was impressive. My life changed. I would go to India from time to time, and I would go up to the Himalayas and I'd practice yoga and stuff. And I would come back down. I remember it was the year 2002. I was living in Hong Kong at the time. I was starting to teach yoga. And I was in a limbo state. I wasn't sure what I really wanted to do in my life at that time. And I remember I went to India, and I went to Mayapur, the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya. This was like February of 2002. And Bhakti Charu Swami had just come to Mayapur. And here I was not sure what I was going to do. And one of my god brothers, he looked at me and said, what are you doing these days? I said, well, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I'm just in a limbo state. I'm teaching yoga in Hong Kong, but I'm just kind of not so grounded. And he said, because Bhakti Charu Swami's servant is planning to get married, so he can't travel with Bhakti Charu Swami anymore. Bhakti Charu Swami needs a servant. Do you want to travel with Bhakti Charu Swami as a servant? I was like, that was the most amazing gift I could ever get in this whole life. I don't know what good fortune I had. Because remember, he had many disciples in Mayapur, many disciples already around the world. And he said, so I remember I went to meet him. And this was, so they decided, I remember they asked me, do you know how to cook? I said, no way I know how to cook. Because Bhakti Charu Swami he was Prabhupada's chef. He used to cook for Prabhupada. There's no way, and he came from such a culture, a high-class family in Bengal, in Calcutta. I said, I can't cook, no way. I have to feel already. And they looked at me and said, okay, all right, we can get someone wherever you go to start up. But can you do like foot massage? I said, yeah, I can do reflexology, I can do foot massage. Can you do this? So we made the arrangement. So I went into the meeting of Bhakti Charu Swami, and he says, I mean, if those who may have met him, they'll understand. His heart was so big, and his kindness is so unfathomable. So much so when Srila Prabhupada was having him to come in his circle, because Bhakti Charu Swami met Srila Prabhupada late. So but Prabhupada recognized his evolution. There's one quote where Prabhupada says that he has a heart of a Bengali mother. His heart is so caring. And I experienced that, those women experience constantly. He loves to see people happy. And I came in that room and he said, what's going on? And because he's so very aristocratic, right? And very knowledgeable, that the times when he would use certain English terms, which were like slangs, I would just be, like he was like, what's up? I was like, that's rare, right? But that's his, like, I said, well, I said, so can you be my servant? I said, to travel with me. I said, yes, Guru Maharaj, I'm doing it. And I remember the next thing he said, as soon as I said yes, he said, how much money do you have in your pocket right now? And I said, I had like maybe $200. He said, give it to me. So I gave it to him because he wants me to be totally surrendered, right? And then a few hours later, he bought me a round the world ticket. In other words, I was going to be his servant. I was going to be surrendered. And so I agreed. Everything is there. We're supposed to be in Mayapur for another like week before we start our travel. So I'm getting trained how to do certain things. And like maybe 2 or 3 days later, one of his godbrothers, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, left his body. And to see how much love he had for his godbrother was amazing, because him and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, they used to serve Prabhupada together. And there's so many pastimes they had of trying to just taking care of Prabhupada, making Prabhupada being as healthy and happy as possible. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was Prabhupada's secretary for the world, and Bhakti Charu Swami was his secretary for Indian affairs. So they lived together so much and they grew together so much. So when Maharaj left his body, I was with Bhakti Charu Swami and see how he felt the anguish, the grief of losing a brother. And our first destination when we left was to Calcutta. And my service was, I had to wash his clothes. I would iron his clothes. I would make sure the chef would make the food and I'd bring it. And whenever he needed to shave his head, I would be the person to shave his head. Whenever he gave, so I got very good at philosophy because I would listen to him teaching philosophy every morning, Bhagavad Gita, and every Bhagavatam, and in the evenings, the Gita. So because I listened so much, that's how my expression of the philosophies became easier, because I was hearing him teaching every day. And from there, we flew to Mumbai. We're in Mumbai for a while, and 2 or 3 days we're in Mumbai, and then we landed in South Africa. And we were in Johannesburg. And I remember we're in Johannesburg, and he's still in that mood of grief from Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And, you know, he's on his phone constantly with different God brothers, God sisters. And the next morning we got up, and this is Bhakti Charu Swami. He would just pick up the Bhagavatam and just open to any page, and he would give a lecture from that page. So he picked up the Bhagavatam, he opened it, and it went to a page where Prabhupada is speaking about the Tamal Krishna, the Tamal tree, the Tamal Krishna tree. It's amazing. And I remember he gave a beautiful class on it. Now, part of my service, remember, I'm learning on the go. I'm learning on the job, right? So part of my service is to record the lectures. And I was so new, and I forgot to record this lecture. And he really, and that was the first, what you call, like, the first chastisement I got. And you can see he really wanted to have it distributed to Tamal Krishna Maharaj's disciples. And he said, true. But then after like 10 minutes later, he was fine. Before we left Mayapur, I remember I had gotten a piece of Tamal Krishna Maharaj's dhoti that he was wearing when he left his body. So Bhakti Charu Swami instructed me, as we travel, whenever you meet Tamal Krishna Maharaj's disciples, just give them a piece of it, right? So everywhere we went, and I met one of Maharaj's disciples, I would cut a piece of his dhoti and as a gift to them. And then I remember also, because one of my friends who was a book distributor once, he was distributing books in Seattle, and he came across an old devotee. Her name is Nando Rani, and Prabhupada disciple, but she had left the movement. And the devotee, my friend's name is Vijay. He's in charge of the book distribution in ISKCON. So Vijay was telling us the story. He met Nando Rani at a book table, and she said, who are you? He said, I'm Nando Rani. Vijay was like, the famous Nando Rani, Prabhupada. She said, yes, that's who I am. And she said, yeah, I don't really come around the temple anymore. I don't come around the society anymore, but I still chant, and I still love Krishna, and I love Prabhupada. And there's one person that I'm always grateful to. And Vijay asked, who? And she said, Bhakti Charu Swami. And we said, why? And she said, she was living in India, in Mayapur, and she got extremely sick. And all the devotees are just, you're not the body, you're a spirit soul. And she said, Bhakti Charu Swami, and also because he's a Swami, he's a sannyasi, he practiced celibacy, right? But Bhakti Charu Swami saw her as a spirit soul, his god sister who was ill. She said Bhakti Charu Swami personally took her on a boat from Mayapur to Navadvip, because he could speak Bengali. So personally took her to the doctor and communicated to the doctor in Bengali. And she said, the Lord for me allowed me to be extremely grateful to him. So she got help, got her health back. And that's Bhakti Charu Swami. He would go out of his way to care for anyone. I remember we went to Durban, and we were on a morning walk, early morning walk, Japan. We came back to the temple, and he's giving a lecture. Now, after the lecture, before the lecture, there was a kirtan, and there's a puja. So normally you offer the candlelight to the deity or the lamp, and then the person will take it around to everyone in the temple. Then they offer water to the deities, and then they give it to and then the person gets the water and sprinkle it around on everyone's head. So I remember there are like maybe 300-400 devotees in the temple, right? And the priest handed me the water. He just offered it to the deities, gave me it in the water bottle, and I put it on. And then the natural thing is you put it on Srila Prabhupada's Murti first, and then you put it on Bhakti Charu Swami second. So I put it on Srila Prabhupada's head, and then I came to Bhakti Charu Swami, and here I am feeling proud. Right? I get to serve Bhakti Charu Swami, right? And I start to sprinkle the water on his head. And he got so upset. He taught me, in that moment, he taught me so much. He said, Charu Chandra, I already took a shower. It should only be a drop, not. And he was teaching me. It is just a drop. It's called mercy. It's just a drop on the head. I already took a shower, and this was in front of like, and I was like, oh wow. And so just being around him, you start to learn of the Vaishnava culture. One of the things that attracted me to him also was at the time when I listened to some of his lectures, and it was from lectures he gave. It's called Vaishnava etiquette. How a spiritual person deals with individual, just culture. How he deals, and when I was traveling with him, I saw him dealing with people who were God brothers, God sisters. Because he joined late, he always saw his God brothers and God sisters as his senior. Even though he was a sannyasi and he was a guru, if he met a God brother of his they were married. Bhakti Charu Swami will treat him with so much respect and tell us this is his senior God brother.
Oh, it's all kind of the same.
So we trained. I was learning the etiquette of how you communicate with individuals. Whenever he met his disciples, he treated them in a whole different manner. I saw many disciples had issues. They would leave the movement and they would come back, and he would compassionately embrace them, encourage them. It's amazing. At the same time, I also saw how sometimes some people who left the movement, but they were offensive, then he would be extremely stern. He would never compromise with people blaspheming Srila Prabhupada. As I spent around him and I'm recording his lectures and I'm learning more and more, I found out 3 things was the innermost chamber of his heart. And he lived by it to the rest of his life. The instruction he got from Prabhupada was, this one he lived by it, he cherished it. He says, when Prabhupada says, your love for me will be shown by how much you cooperate with each other when I am gone. And so when I was traveling with him, I saw so many devotees who had so many tension with each other. And Bhakti Charu Swami would go into a meeting with them, and I'd be right there, just witness it, and just see how his love, and people would come out of it transformed. Because he really wanted people to appreciate the lineage of our Gaudiya Sampradaya. I'm moving around on different, because this just came up to me again. Our lineage is from the Brahma Gaudiya Sampradaya, which Prabhupada came from, and he's initiating us into it. So I remember at my initiation, this just came, anytime he gave initiation, this was his nature, he would always chant the Brahma Samhita. And I was like, wow, I had read the Brahma Samhita before, but I never heard it being chanted like the way Bhakti Charu Swami had chanted it. So it's just, and he had such a melodious voice. The Brahma Samhita is a beautiful book in our culture. It's one chapter of Lord Brahma, the first created being in the universe. And it was discovered by Lord Chaitanya in South India. And it's a book with 62 mantras. And Bhakti Charu Swami would always chant that beautiful text at the initiation. And years later, I got to understand why he did it. It helped us to recognize, yes, we are getting initiated in this beautiful culture all the way from Lord Brahma. And when he would chant in such a beautiful way, and he would come to this part of the Brahma Samhita, which was very sweet, where Lord Brahma is describing the spiritual world. Shriya Kanta Kanta Padama Purusha Kalpatavaro Druma Bhumischintamani Ganamaye Toyamamritam Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Apivamshi Priyasaki Chidanandam Jyoti Paramapitad Aspadyam Apicha Sayatra Shirabhi Shravati Surabhiyascha Sumaham Nimishardarkyo Vavrajati Nahiyatrapi Samaya Bhajesweta Dvipam Tamaham Iha Golokam Ityam Vedantaste Shanta Shitivirala Chara Kati Paye. So that was one of his the way he would chant it was just so sweet. And whenever I hear that, I was like, his mood of understanding we are in this beautiful sampradaya. He was one of the most beautiful chanters. And my travels with him, I remember we got to another experience I had with him was we were in Mauritius. And in Mauritius, there was a temple in a farm, and we were staying in like a resort area. And those days, Bhakti Charu Swami he'd get all the emails, and he would reply to every one of them. But some of them, he would dictate for me, and then some others, he would write by himself on his computer. So I'm learning, here I am, I'm new to typing, right? So I'm typing very slow. So I have to listen to the recordings and then transcribe it. And I remember I would put like, he would say apostrophe or full stop in the dictation. And then sometimes for apostrophe, I would put like, instead of putting apostrophe, I'll just put like capital, or just put, I would forget, and I'll just put 1 instead of the apostrophe, right? And then sometimes, so most of the times, he would check the emails that I type and edit it out and then send it off. But then sometimes I would press send before he even edited. And I remember he would, because he's so meticulous, that if I left out a comma, or if I left out a wrong exclamation, he would get, Charu Chandra, this, he would be so upset that a letter went to one of his godbrothers or one of his disciples, but with the wrong, I mean, he was so meticulous. I learned so much understanding of how, like he was so caring, even in his letters. It's not like a tweet or text. No, he wanted it to be extremely well documented. Then in those days, he's using his computer. He had an extra battery because the battery would die. You have to bring the extra battery. And I remember we went to this home program at this farm and I had the extra battery. And, you know, he gave the lecture and kirtan and prasadam distribution. And I gave the extra battery to someone there who was helping organizing. We drove, and it's an hour to where we were staying. So we drove back home after the kirtan. It's late night. And in the morning we got up. And I remember, where is the battery? Because I know how he asked for it. So he goes on his computer, and as I'm going, then I realized I didn't have it. So I called up my godbrother. I said, could you please bring over this, get the battery, bring it over. And I'm waiting, because I know the battery in the computer is going to die in another hour or so. And I'm stressed out. And I remember waiting, and my godbrother showed up with the battery, man. I jumped on that thing. I'm praying to, thank you, Krishna, thank you, God. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, I hear and he calls my name, Charu Chandra, right? That's how he would refer to me. Could you please bring me the extra battery? I was so relieved that I had it. That was one of those where I really depended on Krishna to help me with that seva. And then one of his beautiful pastimes was cooking. He loved to cook for devotees. So I would see this again and again. Whenever he met his godbrothers, one of his ways of exchanging his love for them was cooking for them. When I first met him, because I knew he was this amazing cook with Vedic cooking. But when I first started traveling with him, he used to cook Chinese for his godbrothers. He would be cooking, you know. I was like, wow, he's an amazing, he can cook anything. Italian, like wherever he went, he learned from the culture and he learned how to cook. So he used to cook a lot of Chinese, he used to cook a lot of Italian, and of course he used to cook, so sometimes we would be cooking and, you know, I would get out of his mercy, just get that beautiful exchange of love that he would share with us. In the nighttime, when he would go to sleep, part of my service was to do like reflexology on his feet. And normally it's only like for 3 minutes, because after 3 minutes, he would already be sleeping. So wherever we went, there's always disciples who want to do that service. So I was able to share that service, you know, show them what to do, how to do, for them to massage his feet. And then the disciples, they knew if they wanted one of Bhakti Charu Swami's hat, what did they do? They would show up to meet him and bring him a brand new hat. And Bhakti Charu Swami is that's his nature. He would take off his, accept the one they gave, and the one that he had, he would gift it back. So I saw that again and again. If you wanted a chadar you gift him a chadar, he would take the chadar off he had and give that to you. That was his way of exchanging. So a lot of my God brothers and God sisters, they got so many paraphernalia in exchange like that. I remember we were in England, and then by this time, whenever we go, wherever we went, he would introduce me. He initiated me as Charu Chandradas, but wherever we went, he started to introduce me as my disciple who is a yogi. So wherever we went, I would do all the contortion, and I would swallow the cloth for people, or I would send the tube through the nose, all the yogic stuff. And he was so happy I was demonstrating. And then he would come and then give the philosophy talks, give the kirtan. So everywhere we went, we did that. England. Then I remember as time this was going on for I was his servant for almost a year. I got so tired because sometimes disciples, they want to ask him questions late into the night. And sometimes Bhakti Charu Swami wouldn't go to sleep until 11, sometimes 12. And I have to go sleep after I have to stay up with him. And then when he goes to sleep, he gets up, with that time I was with him, he gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning to do his japa. So I had to get up 2:55 in tune with him. So by the time I reached New York, I remember I was so tired. And I love this service, but it was and then to be with the Guru, as a lot of people say, wow, it's an amazing seva, but to live with the Guru 27 hours, it confronts your desires, because you can't do it if your desires is not lined up with the Guru's desire. So at one point I got tired, and then I remember I was my desires to go back and teach yoga came in. And I was struggling in my own mind. And we got to New York. This is in October. And I went to him. I said, Gurudev, I am very tired and I would love to take a break from this service. And he said, okay, no problem. I have another disciple who can do it here. And he asked me, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? I said, I would love to go back to Hong Kong and teach yoga there. And he bought my ticket from New York to Hong Kong. And he even gave me a little stipend to get back to Hong Kong. I was very touched by that. But that time I lived with all the qualities of kindness and compassion and philosophy. So when people they meet me teaching yoga, they always ask, how come you're it's because I live with someone who was a representative of Vyasadeva, someone who actually was a living example of a self-realized being. And the way he dealt, how he dealt with people in this world, some of it rubbed off. And you understand how far it is. He was ahead of, I was wow. I remember being in Hong Kong, got settled there, and one year he came to Hong Kong and he spent a week with me. He stayed in Hong Kong with me in a week. And I remember we would I would take him to my clients in Hong Kong. All the amazing clients I had where I was teaching, and he would give lectures to them. He was very impressed with how much I was able to connect business people to the yoga community, lawyers to yoga community, doctors. He was very impressed with that. I remember one day we went to the beach in Hong Kong, and when I get to, there were some tables. So I took off my shirt and I was about to put my shirt on the table. And somehow something told me, don't do it, Charu. And sure enough, Bhakti Charu Swami took off his shirt and he had on his little swim shorts, right? And his culture, he understood the table is dirty, meat and all kind of stuff must have been there. So he looked, where can I put, and he found a tree and he hung his his cloth on the tree. I was like, wow, such in the mode of goodness, always in tune with energies. So I learned from that beautiful experience. I remember once I went to teach a yoga teacher training in Taiwan, and he somehow was visiting Taiwan as well. And I spent about 3-4 days with him in Taiwan. And that time he didn't have a servant. So I was able to drop back into my servant mode and serve him for that whole beautiful 3 days. And then when I moved to Australia, he would visit Australia regularly as well. And he was just so kind to me, and we would have so much beautiful times just exploring the yoga culture and how his plans are changing and what he wants to do. Then I moved to New York, and I remember I wasn't sure what I was going to. I know I was going to move back to America. I was in Hawaii, in Australia, and I was planning to go to Hawaii, but I went to India first. And I met with Charu Swami Maharaja, and he invited me to New York. And that's how I landed in New York. And I remember started teach yoga there. And one day Bhakti Charu Swami visited the Bhakti Center, and Charu Swami came and met me on one floor and took me up to another floor where Bhakti Charu Swami was. And he told Bhakti Charu Swami, look who I've brought for you. And Maharaj was so happy that I was in New York, and that I was teaching yoga, and in the city that Prabhupada gave so much. And I remember right then and there, he asked me to come with him to South Africa once again, just for a week, because he was going to do a presentation of Vedic culture to the government of South Africa, dignitaries. So I was supposed to come and demonstrate yoga and stuff. And I remember he bought my ticket. He flew me to South Africa with him. I did that, came back to New York. And understanding now how dear he was to Srila Prabhupada. And I said so there were 3 things that were part of his lifestyle. Whatever you do. Then another one of his mottos he lived by: whatever you do, don't ever leave ISKCON. Sometimes when you come around the temple, sometimes there's a lot of friction, some devotees are not as evolved. And you hear someone tell you that, they're like, but when you hear someone like Bhakti Charu Swami tell you to stay, and he means it, because he means it from his heart, it's very influential. And the third one, he used to always stress in his lectures, that Srila Prabhupada is the eminent Acharya of ISKCON, and that the GBC is the ultimate governing body. And I was very impressed that he followed that instruction. Whatever the GBC says, he normally does, or not normally, always did. And in the last few years, I was living in Hawaii, and he would call me up in Hawaii. He would always, the last exchange I had with him while I was in Hawaii was, he wanted me to train one of his disciples to be a yoga teacher, and he wanted to set up a yoga studio in Florida. And I remember him calling me up and we speaking. And then the last time I saw him was last year, Ratha Yatra in New York. And he was so enthusiastic to see me, and he wanted me to come to Florida. He wanted me to help with the project in Florida. And, but I was so busy in New York, I never made it to Florida. And I still have, I was going through my phone. It's a few days ago after he passed away. I was going through my phone, and I came across 2 messages he left on my phone, and I still have them. And the messages are from the time he wanted me to come to Florida. And one is very the normal that he would say where, 1 second, out. Where are the messages loud? Can you find the messages now? Anyway, he left a message for me on my phone. Sometimes he would call me and refer to me as Yogi Charu, and sometimes he will call me and refer to me as Charu Chandra. So sometimes he referred to both of me in both. So I remember one of the messages, just his tone of voice. He was calling, he was like, "Dear Yogi Charu Chandra," and he cracked up. So I wanted to share it with everyone.
Hi Krishna, Charu Chandra, can you give me a call when you receive this message? Thank you.
So that was one where he's just referring to me as Charu Chandra. And then there's another one where he's referring to me as Yogi Charu and he cracked up. He doesn't know which one he wanted to call me.
Hare Krishna, Yogi Charu Chandra.
Yogi Charu Chandra.
Bhakti Charu Swami. Give me a call when.
So the last few days I've just been listening to those because he so much wanted me to come and help him with that project in Florida. And when I saw the video that before he left India, and he said that he's in India and he has many disciples around the world who are preaching, who are teaching. Why should he stay in India? He's a general, he's a guru. He should be on the front of the battle. He should be where his students are teaching. So he left India to go to Florida so he could teach. And in that time, he got the virus. And before he went into the ICU, he didn't want to go in unless it was okay by the GBC. His whole life was dedicated to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said the GBC is the ultimate governing body of the society. And when the GBC said yes, then he went in. A life of dedication to Prabhupada. When he got initiation, Prabhupada had already stopped initiating disciples into sannyas. Because some of Prabhupada's disciples who took sannyas were getting married, they didn't want to live a celibate life anymore. So Prabhupada said he won't initiate into sannyas. When you met Bhakti Charu Swami, he initiated Bhakti Charu Swami first initiation, second initiation together. 2 months later, he initiated Bhakti Charu Swami and Gaur Govinda Swami. And when he was about to initiate Bhakti Charu Swami, devotees were like, he's new devotee, he will have difficulty, he will fall down. In other words, give up his vows. And Prabhupada said, I know purity when I see purity. And if he falls down, he can only fall into the mode of goodness. And I remember one of my godbrothers quoted that to him. His disciples said that to him. And then he looked at my godbrother and said, yes, Prabhupada did say, if I fall, I can only fall into the mode of goodness. And then after the mode of goodness, where do you go? You fall into passion, and then you fall into tamas. It's so humble. And then I heard one of his godbrothers said the same thing, but because it was his godbrother, he didn't correct his godbrother, he just kind of listened to it painstakingly. He didn't like to be glorified like that. He always put Prabhupada in the center, and I was like, wow. And Prabhupada's instruction to him was to translate all his books into Bengali. Lord Chaitanya's in Bengal. And when I met him, he was doing that translation, and he completed that translation in the mid-90s. And after that, he just went and wanted to do more and more service. He built a beautiful temple in Ujjain, one of the places where Kumbh Mela is held, where all the yogis come for that festival. And to see that his whole life, I can heartfully say this, his whole life was dedicated to making devotees feel love as part of Prabhupada's family, with Prabhupada in the middle and how to care for each other. So these have been some of my meditations the last few days. I couldn't eat. I was throwing up. I had a headache when I heard the news. Then there's a saying, when the guru passes, the guru teaches us how to live. He also teaches us how to leave this world. And I hope I can one day live up to that high standard of teaching others how to live from a pure-hearted place. And I remember there's a saying in the yoga culture, dreams of the spiritual master are not ordinary. They are spiritual experiences. And maybe about 12 years ago, I remember I had a dream of Bhakti Charu Swami, and I was meditating on it today. It came back in my memory. And in the dream, I had a dream of him taking me to Srila Prabhupada and introducing me to Srila Prabhupada and saying, Srila Prabhupada, this is your grand disciple, Charu. He's distributing your book so much. And he's preaching through yoga. Clear dream. It came back in my memory so strong as I was meditating on him. So I know his physical body is no longer present. I know his spiritual being is back in the spiritual world. And I still, as I meditate on him, I can still feel his presence more and more. And I hope I can, one way or the other, live up to his example. He has many disciples who spent longer time with him. Somehow he gave me that short period of time, and I cherish that about that 1 year. Some good fortune I have, and I know other God brothers of mine who spent much more and probably can tell many more amazing experiences they had with him, but this is some of mine that has allowed me to evolve in this life. And many of you have either done a teacher training at me or through meditation or yoga. And thank you all so much for taking those trainings and trusting me. And just wanted to share with you where I got my evolution from. His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami. That's it.
Hari Om Tat Sat. Oh.
Thank you so much for sharing your ears for the last hour.
As soon as he was sworn in as Attorney General.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yogi Charu.
Haribo, thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much.
Love you very
Thank you. It was so beautiful.
Thank you for sharing, Prabhu.
Thank you all so much. I look forward to seeing you all some again and again.
Thank you, Charu.
Thank you, Murli. Gopal Prabhu.
Thank you so much, Charu.
Thank you, Narada.
Thank you, Yogi Charu.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Nikunda.
Mahalo, Charu.
Charu.
Mahala.
Thank you,
Thank
Charu.
you, Charu Chandraji. Krishna. So beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Vrinda. Thank you so much for organizing this.
First, thank you, Yogi Charu.
Thank you, Rena. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Yogi Charu.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Babadi.
Mahalo, Charu.
Thank you, Bhakti. Thank you, Constantine.
Hare Krishna, much love, Prabhuji, much love.
Thank you, Anna.
Story about whether Moore had intervened in their
Anna was the first person who sent me the message in the morning. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Yogi Charu, for
Thank you
sharing.
for sharing, teacher.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Yogi Charu.
Thank you, Samia. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Charu.
Thank you, Visala. Mahalo. Thank you, Samia. Thank you, Alva. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Rukmini. Thank you, Gora Sharan Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhu. It was so nice to hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for sharing, teacher.
Thank you, Yumiko.
Thank you, Yogi Charu. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much, Yogi Charu.
Thank you for sharing all your time towards me. Yeah, that's it.